Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we are going to be doing a DIY quilted table runner. Now, I came across this idea actually from a blanket. I will try to insert the picture somewhere, but it was this like dark green on green quilted blanket, and I really loved the subtle contrast, and with it kind of being the holiday season right now as I'm filming this, I really wanted to add a little bit of holiday decor to our kitchen area because I have decor for literally other parts of the house, but not very much for the kitchen. So I figured this is the first time we have an actual kitchen table, and it would be so cute just to have a table runner. Very easy kind of sewing project to start with. I am actually getting into sewing. It's something I kind of started at the end of this year, and this was the first official project, like other than me just using scrap material and figuring out how my sewing machine works. This was the first project I actually sewed something, but I do love the way it turned out, and you can always reimagine it, not only for the holidays but for other seasons. You would just change out the colors that you use. Now, the blanket I saw was a green on green. I wanted to do red on red. Just because of the holiday season, red is very popular as a traditional color, as well as this year it's really seen a resurgence of being in all kinds of home decor. So we were going to do red on red. I actually found these fabrics at Joann's. They were very easy, and it was kind of just one tone darker than the other. That way it's a subtle contrast. You can always do really elaborate contrast. You can add patterns into this quilt. You can really pick whatever kind of fabric you want. But for this one, I wanted to keep it simple. Again, not only because it's my first sewing project, but because I was going to add more decor onto the table and I didn't want it to become too busy. So once you get your fabric, the next step is actually cutting the little pieces. Now, I am more of a visual person. We have a vase that I decorate per season with different kind of floral arrangements inside, and I knew I wanted the center diamond to fit perfectly around the bottom of the vase. So that was kind of my measurement to go off of, was slightly bigger, about 1/2 inch on each side of the vase itself. And that was the measurement I personally did. You are more than welcome, obviously, because it is your DIY project, to figure out the size that works best for your table. If you have a wider table, you may want to go a little bit bigger than mine, but mine ended up being a 3x3 square. So I just took over my fabric, I cut a little 3x3 square out of paper. That way all of my cuts were going to be exact and precise. That's the big thing with quilting, is it needs to be exact measurements. Cutting and ironing are the things with quilting that take the longest. The sewing aspect's actually quite quick, but it needs to be exact measurements and straight lines, or your quilt's gonna end up looking really wonky. So I just went ahead, I used a little white pencil. I actually ended up getting like a little sewing kit, and it came with a blue and a white pencil. So I just used that. I have a little rotary cutter, and then after you finish cutting, you're just gonna iron everything down. It makes it so much easier if all of your fabric is flat. And then because it is kind of a quilted design, you're going to cut these squares in half. So that's how you're gonna make the star pattern, is by cutting them in half and then finessing it around. That way the darker bits will be the points of the star, and the lighter red is the actual background of the star. Now, once I had everything all cut, I ended up putting them all together. So I put the darker star around the lighter pieces of red. That way, personally, I can see it, and also I could iron everything down and then start pinning. So you just do it in tiny sections. A quilt is something that builds off of each other. So it starts with little pieces sewn together, and then those little pieces get sewn to other little pieces, and then before you know it, you have an entire quilt. So for this, I am just pinning the little corners of each side. So it's going to make the 3x3 square again, but with different pieces of the fabric. So once I'm done with those, I go back and start ironing them all down. Like I said, ironing is the most time-consuming part of quilting, at least from what I've gathered of the multiple times I've quilted things. It takes the longest, but it also makes the biggest impact. I would never say to skip the ironing part of it, because it helps everything lay down so perfect. And you need it to be able to go and sew the other pieces and make sure everything is still a straight line. Now, this could have been just because I personally am new to quilting, but I really liked being able to lay all of my pieces out every time after I sewed and ironed them down. That way I knew I was sewing together the correct pieces. Maybe someone that is more seasoned in quilting doesn't need to do this, but I personally wanted to make sure. Now with these, when you're adding the two squares together, try your best to line up the seams. That way when it's sewn together, it looks really clean. All the lines will go together and it doesn't look all like piecey. I definitely did the first like kind of tester and my lines weren't always perfect and it definitely looked not great. I know it's a DIY, but I always try to make my DIYs look like you could have bought them. So just keep that in mind. Attention to detail is super important. Even as the quilt gets bigger, remembering to line up your seams will help you out so much. And it's that little attention to detail that matters so much. And you can see it's building on top of each other. It's getting bigger and bigger, and you're just sewing things together piece by piece. And now this is my final square. For your table, you're gonna do multiple squares. So it depends the length of your table. Our table is quite small, so I ended up only needing to do 3 of these little quilted squares. Once you have all of your squares made, that's when you'll start connecting the pieces together. So I am showing you just 2 of the squares, and I'm gonna line up the lines on one end, and then I put right sides together and just sew along that line. So that's how you're going to connect all of them together, is just by sewing the end pieces. Now this is the final result of the front, and now I'm gonna make the backing part. Now with quilting, sometimes people add batting. That is the aspect of like a quilted blanket that makes it plush, is the batting you add in between these 2 layers. Because mine is a tablecloth, I am not going to add any type of batting. I'm just gonna cut along the edge and then sew them together. So I'm not adding batting, you are more than welcome to, but because mine's a table runner, I didn't want it to be plush and soft on the table because of drinks and plates. It just didn't seem like the best option. So I'm just cutting around the actual front part of the quilt, and this will be my batting part. And then I'm also adding a little piece of red trim. Really, that's just aesthetically, I wanted it to look finished off, even on the front. This was a relatively easy project for a beginner sewist. So like I said, this is my first project, and I think it went really well and make this beautiful table runner. I really love the way it turns out. It has been a few weeks since I've made it and finished it, and we've enjoyed it so much. It's brought so much holiday feeling into the kitchen that otherwise is very white on white. And that is the DIY quilted table runner. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them down below, and I will see you next time.